Okay. As I always start out, do you have questions that you need to ask? No? Okay.
I'll get started on my homework. I thought I was caught up.
All right. Brooke, do you have any questions you need to ask?
Specifically, no, but to be honest, I haven't gone through the other part of the homework. I'm kind of running behind this week, so all the information that you give today is going to be super, super, super helpful.
Okay.
I don't have anything specific yet, but.
All right. I'm going to do some practice with y'all on 4.3, so if y'all got a paper and pencil somewhere nearby, grab that. Tisha, do you have any questions you need to ask?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I was making sure I unmuted my mic. I'm really stuck on finding the vertex and the points. If that makes sense.
On the parabolas in section 4.3?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right, so let's talk about 4.3 in general. The basic form for a quadratic equation is this, or quadratic function, I should say, because it's two variables. And the graph will be a parabola. And the vertex form is this. And when it's written in this form, then the vertex is HK. And the vertex is either the top or the bottom point, depending on how it opens. All right, hang on 1 minute. Let me grab a copy of the handout. All right, so on the handout, it tells us that if we need to find the vertex, which is, we call it HK, we take the opposite of B and divide by 2A, then you find F of that value, meaning you substitute whatever you get back into the equation to find the second part of the vertex. So, suppose we have this equation. Well, A is 1 because it's that invisible 1, and B is -3. And H is the opposite of B, so that'll become a +3 over 2 times A, which is 3/2. So I know that the first coordinate of the vertex is 3/2. Now to find the second coordinate, I need to take that value and substitute it back in. And y'all can do that on paper, or you can do it with the calculator, whichever makes you happy. So 9 minus 18 is a -9, minus 16 is a -25. So that tells me that my second coordinate is -25 over 4. Alright, is there a question about how I got that part of it?
This the -16. Where did -16 come from?
That's getting a common denominator, changing 4 over 1.
Multiplied by 4.
Yeah. But again, you can do all of that on the calculator. No, will it show up? Sort of. So I could do 3 fraction 2 squared minus 3 times 3 fraction 2 minus 4, and it's going to give me a mixed number, and then I do second fraction equals, and can y'all see that says negative 25 over 4? So you can do that on the calculator if you want to. If you do it on paper, you got to get a common denominator. But one thing you need to know is that 99% of the time, regardless of what they ask you about the parabola, you need to find the vertex and draw the graph, even if it doesn't say to do that. Because it is in doing that that we're able to answer lots of other questions. So on a graph, this would be 1 1/2, and this would be negative 6 1/4. So 1 1/2 and negative 6 1/4 is about right there. Now, the handout tells you that if A is positive, the parabola is going to open up. The vertex is going to be a minimum. The minimum value will be K. And then it talks about where it's increasing and decreasing. So since our A on this problem was a positive 1, I know that in general this is going to open up. Now, to figure out where it crosses up here and where it crosses here, I need to know the intercepts. And that could be another question, or it might not be a question at all. It depends on what they're asking for. For example, they could say, what's the domain and the range? Alright? If they do that, then all I need to do is find the vertex, sketch the graph, and I can then talk about the domain and the range. I've told you on here, well, that it's not printed on mine, but I printed it on yours. The domain, I think I wrote it right over here, is always all real numbers. Did I put that on the one that I gave y'all? Did anybody print out the one I gave y'all?
I printed it out.
Okay. Did I write it right up here in this area?
No. Sorry. I have the other one out. Let me.
Okay.
So the all quadratic functions is the negative infinity
Yeah.
versus
Yes.
infinity.
Yes.
And then I just wrote always next to it and underlined it.
Good.
Yeah, I wrote always based on your video.
Okay. So that's going to, oops, I keep forgetting that recording. Y'all, that blocks y'all out from seeing it, doesn't it? So that's always the domain, because way back when, that's not the right one. When we talked about domain, we said there were only 2 things that cause problems. Either having a radical or having a denominator. And a quadratic function never has either of those, therefore it's all real numbers by that property as well. Alright, now the range, it's always going to be from a negative infinity up to some point, or from some point up to positive infinity, depending on which way it opens. So this one, the range starts right here, which you know is negative 6 1/2 because you calculated that. And it's all the y values above that. So the range starts at negative 6 1/2, which is negative 25 over 4, 6 1/4 rather, not a half, and it goes to infinity. It starts here because your range, you're saying what are the y values. The y values start right here and they keep going on forever. So if they ask you the domain and the range, you would do what I just did and you're through. But I noticed on one of the questions, it gave you an equation and said, what's the domain and the range? It didn't say find the vertex, draw the graph. But you need to find the vertex, draw the graph in order to answer that question. So it's kind of implied in there, even though it didn't say to do that. Alright, now another thing they might ask you is to find the intercepts. So I'm going to take this same equation and you know that to find the x-intercept, you're going to let y be 0 and solve for x. And the majority of the time, you're going to need to factor this one. Sometimes you have to use the quadratic formula, but I've tried to avoid those as much as possible. So the two numbers that I can multiply to get a -4 and add to get a -3 are a -4 and a +1. Then you set each of those equal to 0. And then you've really got to read the directions. Does it say enter them as a number? Or does it say enter them as an ordered pair? The ones I've looked at said as an ordered pair. So you would write it like this. And then it also says to separate them by a comma. So you got to put that little comma right there. Now, the questions I've looked at, you did x-intercepts and y-intercepts all in one thing, I think. So when you do the y-intercept, you're going to let x be 0. And you get 0 minus 0 minus 4, which is -4. And you got to remember to put that comma right there. So that's what I would list if the question was, what are the intercepts? Another question it might ask is, what is the axis of symmetry? Well, right here on our handout, it says the axis of symmetry is x equals h. That has to be in the form x equals. This is the time that you do put x equals in there, because it's the equation of a line. It's not just a single number. So you got to put, let's see, where'd my paper go? So when I computed what h was, the opposite of b over 2a, my axis of symmetry is x equals 3/2. And that's what I would enter for the axis of symmetry. And what that is a line that divides the parabola in half. And what that allows us to do is, if we were plotting it by computing, I said that wrong, graphing it by plotting points, once we had a point here, we could come the same distance and match a point over here. That's what the line of symmetry helps you do. Alright, back to my graph. I found that the x-intercepts were 4, 0, and -1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. And -1, and my y-intercept was -4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I didn't miss it too much. Find some different color over here.
Hey, Miss Wendel,
Yes.
are you guys having, or is anybody else having an issue with hearing or the video cutting out and back on again? I don't know if it's just me or not, but there's something really weird and glitchy. It's like a lot of feedback, and it keeps cutting on and off, and I'm not sure if it's just me needing to log out and log back. Is everybody experiencing that, or just me?
I don't know. Y'all talk to me. Sarah, is it going in and out on you?
No, mine's fine.
Okay. Tisha, what about yours?
Mine is fine.
Okay, let me just log out and log back in. Y'all keep going. I'm sorry.
That's
I just
okay.
want to make sure I wasn't sure if it was me or not. I'm gonna get
I
on
know
right
sometimes mine freezes, and I try to watch the little timer that's clicking off to know that when it does that, but sometimes I forget.
It might just be me. My Wi-Fi's been weird all day. So
Okay.
All right. I'm
All right.
sorry to interrupt. I'll be right
No
back.
problem. I'm glad you did. Tisha, does that help you?
Yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense now that you break it down like that.
Okay. Amanda, do you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Then if y'all will grab a piece of paper, I'm going to give you one to do. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to find the vertex. I want you to find the x-intercepts. I want you to find the y-intercepts. Find the domain. If you miss that, I'm going to hang you by your ears. Find the range. Let's see, what else can we do? Find the axis of symmetry. Okay. Y'all work on that.
You slide the paper up so I can see below range. Write it all down.
Brooke, are you back with us?
I am.
Okay, I couldn't see you on there. I just wanted to be sure you were there.
Yes. It's still kind of like jumpy, but I don't know. I think it's my Wi-Fi, which I can see what's on the screen. I can hear you
Okay.
when you're talking right now, so it should be okay.
All right. Travis, what's your question?
I understood one litigant vertex and the axis of symmetry, but I'm struggling to remember. I got my X, Y, and the main range, and I can't remember how to put them down.
All right. Did you find the vertex?
I can't remember how to do it.
Okay. Did you print out this paper that I sent you by email?
I don't think I printed that one.
Okay.
I did.
I don't think I got that one.
All right. Well, you need to print this one because this is where the instructions are. To find the H part, you take the opposite of B and divide it by 2A, and that's this B and this A. So for this problem, I took the opposite of 7, that's the opposite of B, and I divided by 2 times A, which was 4. So that's the H part. That gives me 2 things. It tells me what the first coordinate is of the vertex, and it tells me that x equals negative 7/4, I don't need that parenthesis, is the line of symmetry. Because on here it says that x equals h is the axis of symmetry.
Let me write that down real quick.
Okay.
I can print it off my phone, but I just... I'll write that formula down.
Alright, so once I found h, you take that value and substitute it back into the equation to figure out what the k part is. So here was my equation right here. So I put in negative 7/4 in the place of x. And I did the math. And you can do this on the calculator, you can do it on paper, but let me caution y'all, are y'all listening? If you do it on the calculator, be sure you put these fractions in parentheses, because with it being a negative fraction, if you don't put it in parentheses, it won't square it correctly. So be sure you put it in parentheses, and then either do it on paper or do it with the calculator, and you get negative 81/8. So now I know what the vertex is. Now to put that on a graph, I have to think about it as mixed numbers. So that's negative 1 3/4. So that's about right there. And this is negative 10 1/8. So I'm just going to assume that's negative 10 right there. Right there. So negative 10 and a tiny bit more right about here. And because my A, this A right here, 2, is positive, it tells me that in general my parabola opens up. Now to find the specific points, I could use my intercepts. So to find the y-intercept, to find the x-intercept, I let y be 0. And this is a good practice on factoring, because this is a factoring where the leading coefficient is not 1. You remember we multiplied 2 times -4 and put it up here. And we copied the 7 and put it down here. And we found two numbers that will multiply to give us -8 and add to give us +7, which are these two numbers right here, +8, -1. So when I come back, I copy the first term and I copy the last term, and instead of that middle term, I put these two in its place. So that's how I got the +8x minus x. Then I factored by grouping, by looking at these two to see what they had in common. And they had a 2x in common, and that gave me x plus 4. And the way I taught you was to come down here and write the x plus 4 and then figure out what number needed to go here to make it happen. So to multiply this by something to get those two, I had to multiply by -1. Then you factor out the x plus 4 because that's what's common, and your other factor is 2x minus 1. Then I set each of those equal to 0, and I got -4 and 1/2. So now I know that my x-intercepts are -4, 0, and 1/2, 0. So it's going to hit my x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, and at 1/2. Now for the y-intercept, if you put zeros in there, am I frozen? Okay. If you put 0 in there, you're just going to get -4. So my y-intercept is 0, -4. That means it hits my y-axis at -4. So my graph's going to go like this and like that. It should be more rounded. It's not a point down there. It's supposed to be rounded. Alright, so what have we said? We found the vertex was -7/4, -81/8. We found the x-intercepts were -4, 0, and 1/2, 0. The y-intercept, the domain is always all reals. And the range is this y value and up. Well, that y value is this y right here, the y part of the vertex. So it's from that point up. So I write it, excuse me, like that. And I already wrote on the other paper the axis of symmetry was x equals -7/4. Oh, stop. Okay. Does that help any?
Yes.
Can you ask me a question about something that I did that would help clear it up for you?
No, it looks pretty clear. I think it looks good.
Okay, Travis, what about you? Do you understand what we did?
Sort of, David. I think it's too much of the time. I know where I screwed up, but I screwed up on my factoring.
Okay.
Maybe I could have got a lot further if I would have did that. And
Yeah, we got to be careful. When this number's not a 1, you got to do that grouping.
yeah, that's right. And I did. I had factored it out. I got an 8 and -1, and then I factored out 2, and had an x plus 8, x minus 1, and it did. So
All right.
I didn't factor it back into it.
All right. In the time that's remaining, let me see if I can find a good problem for us to do. Yeah, here's one. I want to look at the kind where you have to find the equation. That's the next part of this section. So it'll give you a vertex, or it'll show you a vertex on the graph. And then it's going to give you some other point. Let's say it says 60 is another point. Alright, I wrote that on the bottom part of the handout. Let me see if I can make it show up. You're given an H and a K and an X and a Y. That's your vertex and your point. And you take this vertex form of the equation and fill in those four numbers. So you should have everything filled in except an A. So you solve for the A. Now you know an A, an H, and a K, and you come back and fill those in. You leave the Y as a Y and the X as an X, and that's how you get the answer for finding the equation. So let's do one of those. So I'm going to start out with this, which is the vertex form. This is H, this is K, this is X, this is Y. So I'm going to fill in all of those values. So the only thing that's unknown is A. Now, I would suggest to you that you rewrite this as 9A so it doesn't confuse you, because we don't ever write A9. So once you figure out what this number is, rewrite it as 9A, or whatever the number is, with the A coming second. So now I'm going to add 9 to get rid of this. And then I'm going to divide by 1. No, I'm not. I'm going to divide by 9 and get 1. So I found A is 1. So now you come back to the generic form, vertex form. You know what A is, so you fill that in. You know what X was because it was given to you. You know what K was because it was given to you. And you leave this Y as a Y and this X as an X. Now we normally wouldn't write that 1 when we simplified. So our best answer is X minus 3 squared minus 9. Now, if it tells you that you must give the answer in standard form, then you need to square this. So you come off to the side and you multiply X minus 3 times X minus 3, doing the distributive property or full. And when you do that, you're going to get X squared minus 6X plus 9. That's this 9 I just copied. So now this is going to cancel out. And that's my answer. That's an X. That's my answer in standard form. This is my answer in vertex form. This is my answer in standard form. It just depends on what the directions give you about which way you do it. Alright, can anybody ask me a question about something I did there? Or is there another question that's come to your mind that you need help with?
No, that actually finally made sense to me. That was where I was struggling, was with the vertex at that point.
Okay.
And how to break it down. So thank you for that.
Alright. Amanda, are you okay with this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I like that one a lot better. That question better than the other one.
Okay. Alright, so this coming up week, you're going to do a quiz on chapter 3 and 4. It's a combined quiz because we only did like 2 sections here and 1 section here. So it's a combined quiz. Then we're jumping to chapter 6, and you're going to do 6.1 and 6.3. That'll be this week's assignment. Then next week, you'll have an assignment on 6.4, and I'll have a review assignment for you. And then the next week, you're going to take the final. So that's where we are. I've pondered about how to do this review, and because you're doing the final on the computer, and because some of the times the reason you miss things is you don't answer the right question, I've decided to do the review on the computer as well. I started to do a video where I would give you a problem, and like we just did a minute ago, tell you to pause it and then come back and work it. But I think you need that practice of typing the stuff in on the computer, since that's what's given some of you troubles. Alright, anybody got any more questions?
Done for me.
Okay. We've got about a minute and a half left. I tell you every time, y'all don't ever do it, but I tell you every time, if you need my help during the week, just reach out to me. I did remember to hit record this time, so I will post this as a video in case you need to go back and look at some part of it.
I think that's the most helpful part, is the videos like on YouTube, and I go back there and watch them like on the TV, and my kids are like, oh, Mom's doing math homework again. They can always hear your voice, like they know who you are now. Like a celebrity in this house now, so I play the videos on my YouTube on my TV.
Bless their hearts. Alright, well then we will sign off, and I will see y'all next Monday. Unless you reach out to me in between.
Okay, thank you.
Alright. See y'all later.
All right, bye-bye.